Is Europe on the verge of a major shift? Will supporters of Vladimir Putin and friends of China soon have more power in the European Parliament? According to polls ahead of the European elections, right-wing populists and nationalists are attracting more voters. But Europe's far right is also seeing divisions between the Alternative for Germany, AfD, and the French National Rally Party around Marine Le Pen. How extreme do EU voters want the Union to be? What alliances are being forged? Ursula von der Leyen, the Conservative president of the EU Commission, is openly courting the votes of the Italian head of government, Giorgia Meloni, and her ultra-right Fratelli d'Italia. On To The Point, we ask Europe's far right, tempting partners for conservatives? Welcome to this week's To The Point. I'm Javier Arguedas. It's good to have you with us, and let's meet today's guests. Nadine Lindner is the Berlin correspondent for Germany's Deutschlandfunk, specialized in East German politics and the AfD Party. Michaela Küffner is DW News chief political editor. And Burkhard Birke is a freelance journalist. He has previously worked as a correspondent in Paris and Brussels. To all of you, welcome. Thank you for being with us. And I'd like to start with you, Burkhard. All of Europe is seeing a shift towards the right. Even countries that have a tradition of liberal politics, like Sweden or the Netherlands, are seeing extreme right-wing politicians in their governments. What did traditional parties do wrong?
Well, it seems that the traditional parties did not attend the needs and the preoccupation of the citizens, like the question of migration. I mean, that the flows come, that there's some countries like Italy or Greece which were just overflown due to the Dublin agreement that used to reign in the European Union. Secondly, I think that just the infighting, which we see in many of the governments, for instance, in Germany, with our famous coalition between liberals, Greens and Social Democrats, is leading to the point that the people just get desperate. They don't want the people to fight at the top, their governing bodies to fight, but to act. And we have inflation, we have pandemic, we have the war in Ukraine, and these are needs that really people are looking for direction, for a strong hand, and this is why we see a movement also to more authoritarianism and a hard hand to rule. And I think this explains some of it, that also the European Union cannot answer the basic questions. It has not been reformed, has not deepened, as Macron has always proposed and wanted to do, and so the people feel left alone and they turn to nationalistic, populistic parties.
We're definitely seeing that on a national level. The question is if that's also going to happen on the EU level. Nadine, how much power do these political parties have to actually change EU politics at the moment?
Well, I think until now they are divided into two fractions or two groups within the European Parliament. This is the ID, the Identity and Democracy, and on the other hand, the EKR, European Conservatives and Reformers. So until now, they haven't really joined forces yet. And it will be very interesting to see what happens after the 9th of June, after the European election, to see if they will join forces, if they will find new partners, maybe within the Conservatives. And if will there be like one huge right-wing super group within the European Parliament, I think then they can really change the politics in Brussels. If they fail to form their inner coalitions, I think they will stay fragmented. But on the other hand, the point is the shift to the right within Germany, within other countries, within the EU can't be ignored by the Conservatives, also maybe by the Social Democrats, by all the parties who will rule within the EU Commission. So I think there will be changes in the politics, even though right-wing politicians are not really in power, but they will produce a visible change.
And definitely more pressure towards the traditional parties. Now, Michaela, living in Germany these days, it seems like you are exposed to a bombardment of political ads saying this election is crucial, this election is important, go vote, it matters. What do you think makes it different from previous EU elections?
Well, elections are always crucial. But clearly we are seeing what could be a potential watershed moment of the right and the extreme right actually playing a larger role in Brussels. When you see Ursula von der Leyen, who's the top candidate for the EPP, for the centrist conservative bloc, really vying for support from someone like Giorgia Meloni, who has actually mastered the game of being far right at home, but actually being a surprisingly pro-European politician once she's in Brussels. And that is in itself a change in the way Brussels works, in the way European politics works. So the question is whether the far right can actually become a mainstream force that can no longer be seen as exactly that, this small fragment at the end of the spectrum of what is mainstream politics.
And that will ultimately depend on the voters. If we take a deeper look at Germany, voters of the far-right party seem to be very resilient. The Alternative for Germany has been monitored by the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution for years. The German Domestic Intelligence Service classified the party as a so-called suspected case of right-wing extremism, and rightly so, as a court confirmed a few weeks before the European elections. It's one of just many scandals. Here's a look at the party's leading figures.
Björn Höcke is the AfD's leader in the German state of Thuringia, where he's spreading a radical nationalist ideology that some have called fascist. In May, a court imposed a fine on the former history teacher for knowingly using a banned Nazi slogan. Maximilian Krah is the AfD's top candidate for the European elections. One of his employees allegedly spied for China. Of course, spies are a problem. Krah has also been accused of accepting money from Russia and the Chinese Secret Service, which he denies. In one interview, Krah claimed that not all members of the SS were criminals, sparking international outrage. Peter Bistrom is number 2 on the AfD's European election list. He is also currently under investigation for allegedly accepting money from Russia to promote pro-Russian propaganda, which he also denies. Is the AfD too extreme for Europe's right-wing populists?
We're about to see now. Nadine, AfD supporters dismiss all those allegations as nothing short of a media conspiracy to damage the party ahead of the elections. How significant are those revelations?
Well, this will be an interesting point to see on the 9th of June, because until now we don't see really, how can I say, a tumbling in acceptance within the voters. We see them with like 17%, which is a huge plus compared to the 11% the AfD had in the 2019 EU elections. So still more people are supporting the AfD. I think we have 2 points that are really important. Well, on the one hand, AfD supporters have a huge skepticism about traditional or established media. They don't really trust what they hear and see within media. And on the other hand, I think there's like a strong motivation to vote AfD to show some disrespect against the elites. I think to vote for AfD is an anti-elite vote. And I think this motivation is stronger than the skepticism about the scandals. And sometimes AfD offers their supporters some rhetoric regarding, also within the other parties, they also have their scandals. Von der Leyen has some investigations, or there's Qatargate within the EU Parliament, which concerned the Social Democrats. So I think they have some rhetorics to defend themselves, and their supporters believe them.
They definitely do. However, even though the party is acting as if nothing is happening, more or less, Michaela, it does have an impact. Is this a big problem for the AfD internally, all these scandals that are going on?
I tell you, what I see as the biggest problem is that Marine Le Pen basically said that they don't have a leadership, which discredits them at the European level as anyone you can actually work with. At the national level, you can see how they are, I'd say, in a panicked mode to get a grip on the situation. I mean, you couldn't make this up. Their top candidate has been banned from actually appearing for election rallies. He's been spotted appearing publicly just a day ago. So that is already being looked at with suspicion within their own party. Number 2 on the list is also no longer palatable. as we just saw. So number 3 on the list is the one who's carrying the weight of the campaigning right now. So that raises some rather fundamental questions on how they even present themselves over this very, very long couple of days until the 9th of June, until that vote actually takes place. So are they publicly discredited? But that really raises the point, where does the support come from? And if you speak to potential voters on the street, it's more a symptom of gutsy politics, of people resenting an establishment. And that is something that is not going to go away. I've spoken to AfD voters who say, well, they just wanted to demonstrate to the established system that they're against it. So it feeds into a reduction in support for democracy as the favoured form of government. That still has a large majority here in Germany, but also there is a growing sense of people being more open to a more authoritarian style of politics. So the question is, are they a political force in themselves in the future? I think there are some huge question marks right now here in Germany. Or do they remain a symptom of a rejection of politics as it's done right now?
And that's, of course, a very important question, Burkhard. Do they have policies and suggestions for the future, a vision for their countries that actually appeal to voters? Or is this more the protest vote that we so often hear of?
It's funny you ask, because we were just discussing before the program that we have the impression that most of the AfD voters don't even read the program the party has published.
I think that applies to all parties, actually.
Yeah. But because they got things in there like abolish the tax on gasoline, and so I mean this is unrealistic. Where do you get the billions back? You know, or all this Euroscepticism? I think it's really a protest party, especially, and what I'm seeing here is a little bit of Trumpism. Because what does Trump do? It's a witch hunt. All they say about me is not true, and so on. This is a little bit the attitude I see at the moment at the top level of the AfD, because they try to save what is to save. But I mean, they've been rejected even by their right-wing partners in Europe, which was really a slap in the face. And so that should give them to think. But I mean, all the moderate elements have been eliminated from the leadership in the course of the years. So what is left is a party that's turning more towards the extreme right.
But do voters care about that rejection or about those scandals to protest?
Apparently not. If you look at the latest polls, I mean, the AfD went down from 22, then the scandals came to 15. Now they're up again at 17. You know, it affects a little bit, but the real test will be Thuringia, when we have a local election, a regional election in the federal state of Thuringia. So we will see how strong they get there, because they used to be, or they could be the strongest party there. For a long time in the polls, they were the strongest party there. But, I mean, there's the firewall that the other parties want to set up against them. But I wonder if the Christian Democrats really would cooperate with the left, you know, in order to avoid cooperating with the AfD. That is to be seen.
That notion of the firewall has been so far holding up here in Germany, Michaela. Do you think that's going to change in the future?
I think it has already somewhat changed. If you speak to the top CDU candidates of the CDU in eastern states, in Thuringia, for instance, they are finding it hard. And if you speak to local politicians, they find it virtually impossible. I heard one speak about it and say, look, are we going to refuse to agree to building that bridge? Because it was something the AfD came up with, yes. So that is getting more difficult, but in terms of German politics overall, that simply is not going to happen, that you're going to see a coalition with the far-right AfD Party at the national level anywhere. I dare say you're not going to see a formal coalition with the AfD anywhere in Germany, whichever level. But then there's day-to-day politics where you need to get stuff done. But I don't think that is necessarily the key question. I mean, you also have Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, which is a left leader who is now actually surprisingly successful with being, I always describe her as being so left that she comes out on the right. Because she manages to combine left-wing politics, particularly on social issues and market economy issues, with an anti-migration stance. So that appeals to different camps, and she may be the most effective political tool against the far-right AfD at the regional level, because she's already up in above 5%, sometimes above 10% in some regions, particularly in the East where it matters so much.
It's definitely something we thought was unthinkable just a few years ago.
And interesting enough, they're for peace in Ukraine. I mean, pro-Russia to really finish off with this conflict, which is also...
I just want to say everybody is for peace in Ukraine. Yeah?
But
her argument is you just need to give Russia whatever it wants.
Yes,
exactly.
That's also a stance that divides the European Parliament for sure. Coming back to what Burkhard mentioned about the rejection on a European level, how significant do you think it is for the likes of Marine Le Pen to reject AfD at this moment?
Well, I think for Marine Le Pen, it's a decision that counts on Marine Le Pen. I think it's not for her, the fate of the AfD is not really important. I think for her, the year 2027 is really important. Then we have the presidential election in France, and she wants to be the next president of France. So she has to win more than 50% of the voters in France. So it's important for her not to only find right-wing voters, but also to attract voters of the middle. So she needs to finish her course of anti-diabolization, or of, how can I say, her idea of make the RN, the Rassemblement National, of make it more electable to voters of all camps. So I think for her, the AfD is not really useful. For her, it can be more of a problem. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I think we still have to see the whole the whole right-wing politics in Europe is now really fragmented, but still we have to see what happens after the 9th of June. I think we have two major questions. The first question is, will we have a supergroup within the EU Parliament? And then also the question, is Meloni supporting Ursula von der Leyen? Is she more or less switching the camp, going more to a right-middle camp with supporting her? And I think, to me, Giorgia Meloni is the most crucial, the most decisive figure right now in the game. She will be the one who gives the most decisive impulse to the whole scene.
We'll take a look at exactly that. The turmoil in the European Parliament is paving the way for new alliances, even those that were previously a no-go. In order to secure her re-election for a second term, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen from the Conservative EPP bloc is openly courting Giorgia Meloni, the Italian head of government, and her party, the post-fascist Brothers of Italy.
Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is being courted by two different political ideologues, including right-wing nationalist Marine Le Pen and conservative politician Ursula von der Leyen. In the run-up to her re-election bid, the head of the European Commission has demonstrated that she's open to cooperating with Meloni's far-right Fratelli d'Italia party in the European Parliament.
I have been working very well with Giorgia Meloni in the European Council. The topics we're going to offer, there we're going to see whether those who are pro-European, and she is clearly pro-European, against Putin, she's been very clear on that one, and pro-rule of law, if this holds, and then we offer to work together.
In response, Le Pen is proposing a joint parliamentary group that includes her party members. Together, that would make them the second largest bloc in the European Parliament. Le Pen, whose National Rally Party is even further to the right, says that she and Meloni agree on the main issues. Le Pen or von der Leyen, who will win Meloni's support?
It's not easy to tell, but I throw the question to you, Burkhard. Who do you think it's going to be?
Well, Meloni and Le Pen, this is also a proposition of Viktor Orban from Hungary. I mean, he wants these two groups to cooperate, but I think that von der Leyen will be very cautious of cooperating with Le Pen. But she will be eventually willing to cooperate or to be elected by the votes of Fratelli d'Italia, by Giorgia Meloni's party, because, as she mentioned, formally, Giorgia Meloni fulfills the criteria. She is pro-Ukraine, she's pro-European, as far as of now, during her government, and she's pro-rule of law. So these are the three criteria. In the pro-Ukrainian stance, Marine Le Pen in the past, I must say in the past, has been doubtful, with her stance pro-Russia. So I think in the case that the majorities will be that von der Leyen needs some more votes than maybe just the Social Democrats and Greens or so, or doesn't get enough votes, I think she will rely on the Conservatives of the ECR group and the Fratelli d'Italia. I think she will rely on it.
We're talking about these three criteria to be pro-European, if you will, Nadine. It seems like a pretty low standard these days.
Yeah, and I think, there's like one point, and it's really interesting that von der Leyen doesn't mention it, because von der Leyen had one like really central and important project within like her first 5 years. It was the Green Deal. It was one of her major projects. And I think to her, it must be really clear that she can't follow, that she can't really finish the Green Deal when she seeks for support from the right-wing politics, because like climate politics is like on the top of the list of stuff that the right-wing politics don't want. So I think for her, it must be clear that it will be a huge step back. We have seen it with the EU renaturation law that the Conservatives sided with the ECR or seeked support from the right wing. And, well, in the end, the whole project was really a danger. So, and we see the protests of the farmers within Germany, also within the Netherlands, within France, within other countries within the EU. So there's like a huge push also from that side to make the politics more liberal there, to focus less on climate standards, on environmental standards.
Michaela, we often talk about these parties as being niche parties, but in the end, they will say that they are the better representatives of democracy in Europe, that they represent the voters' interests more. Do you think with a stronger right wing, if you will, in the European Parliament, that will also see policies that are closer to the people?
The short answer is no, because that's not how the European Union works. And this is actually a huge, a notable difference between the European Union and the United States, for instance. It's not the winner takes it all. Compromises have to be made. It's like a choir. It will only determine how loud the far right will be heard in the European Parliament, which has to sign off on any European project, laws. So it is a very powerful environment. At the same time, you need the heads of state as well. And so on key issues like trade, power is firmly in Brussels, but on many issues, it still rests with the individual states. And I just want to point out one huge difference, which I think is kind of a telltale sign that this is not just about money as well. Bernie Sanders, the leftist senator of the United States, his argument in the States is that you can beat right-wing populism by having something like more social security, free healthcare, people taken care of. Well, Europe has all of this.
Yes.
So it's not just about the money. It's more complex than that. So, yeah, that was a long answer.
Yeah, but it's a complex
we are nowhere
question.
near a right-wing takeover of the EU. We're just not.
What are we close to then, Burkhard? Would you say that it will become more difficult to govern in the European Union? You mentioned how important it is to have leadership and to have a strong notion of where we're going, if you will.
It will be definitely more difficult to govern Europe, although, as Michaela has mentioned, the European Parliament has limited competences. So, they elect the Commission President, but in the end, as we saw last time, the head of states can overrule, and they have to appoint or approve the commissioners, and so they have a say in the budget of the EU, but and on international agreements, so like the free trade agreement with Mercosur could fall if the ultra-conservatives or ultra-right does not agree. Eventually, that could be a possibility. But in the end, the most of the say is with the Council of Ministers still and with the national states. But what I see is that the people in the different states are looking for identity. That is what leads to more nationalism, because they see that the EU does not really solve their problems. And I am so disappointed that Angela Merkel did not agree to the proposals of Emmanuel Macron many years back to reform the EU. We need a reform of the EU. We need a European Parliament that really has legislative powers. it's absurd. The executive, I mean, the Council of Ministers is at the same time the legislative body. I mean, this is absurd. It's just like the ECOFIN, the Council of Ministers for economic and currency questions are the finance ministers of the countries. I mean, they will never punish themselves for not fulfilling the criteria of stability. So there are many construction faults in the European Union which need to be attended and haven't been attended, which lead to a dissatisfaction in the population. And furthermore, I think this election, this European election, is also about national politics, where the people vote to approve or disapprove of their national governments, be it in Spain, be it in Germany, be it in France. That's where we see a disapproval, for instance, in Germany, and the strong AfD or strong Marine Le Pen.
And hence that big difference between national politics and the EU politics. That's all we have time for, unfortunately, but I want to thank all three of you for joining us today. Of course, you for watching. And remember that you can always watch our shows on our YouTube channel. Just look for DW News and the latest To The Point show. I'm Javier Arguedas. Until next time, take care and goodbye.